Hello and welcome to a Talmud Israeli English language production. This week, the Daf Yomi program studied Masechet Shabbat, Dapim Lamed Zayin through Mem Gimel. Let's go to some of the highlights of those Dapim. 37, Daf Lamed Zayin. Here we find issues of Shehiyah and Hachazara. Shehiyah, of course, is the practice of leaving over pot on a stovetop from Friday going into Shabbat. And Hachazara refers to returning a pot of food to a fire on Shabbat. As is in many areas of halacha, there is a machlokat in this matter between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. And, as could be predicted, Beit Hillel adopts a lenient position, and Beit Shammai adopts a strict position. While the exact parameters of when Shehiyah and Hachazara are permitted is beyond the scope of this video, there are certain factors and certain parameters that can give us some guidance. One area is mevushal kol tzarko o ena mevushal kol tzarko. Is the food in question fully cooked or not fully cooked? If it's fully cooked, that is a factor leaning towards permissibility. If it is not fully cooked, that's a major problem, and Shehiyah and Hachazara will not be allowed. Another consideration is mitzdamek v'yafelo and mitzdamek v'ralo. If a food that condenses as it is left on the stove over time, does it get better or does it get worse? If it gets better, that may be a factor for stringency. If it gets worse, that's a factor for leniency, possibly even to allow Shehiyah in a situation where the stovetop is not garuf v'katum, not shoveled or banked. Let's go to Daf Lamed Chet 38. Here we find the question of what happens if food was illegally cooked on Shabbat. Hamivashel b'Shabbat, b'shogeg yochal, b'mezid lo yochal. If it happened inadvertently, then you could eat the food. If it happened deliberately, you cannot eat the food. Some question arises in the Gemara whether or not we should be concerned that people will be deceptive and dishonest about why it is that they cooked on Shabbat, claiming to have been inadvertent when in fact it was deliberate. But the Gemara seems to conclude that when it comes to the serious issue of mivashel b'Shabbat, a biblical violation of cooking on Shabbos, that lo atila arume, people will not be deceptive. Daf Lamed Tet 39. The Mishnah tells an interesting story about the behavior of the Anshe Tiberia, the people of Tiberias. Those of you who are familiar with Tiberias know about the hot springs, naturally occurring hot springs, that some of you may have visited. So what happened? The people of Tiberias, they took a pipe of cold running water and ran it through the hot spring in order to warm up water on Shabbat. Is this legal? Masechet Shabbat Anshe Tiberia, ve'eviu silon shel tzorin mitoch amah shel chamin. Now, when the rabbis found out about this, they weren't so happy. And ultimately, the people of Tiberia were not able to take advantage of the hot water that they had indirectly cooked on Shabbos. Go to Daf Mem 40. And here we find the issue of water that was heated up from before Shabbat. Are you allowed to use that water to bathe yourself on Shabbat? And we have a variety of opinions that are expressed among the Amoraim. One perspective is Rochetz bahen kol gufo aver. A person could wash their entire body, but not exactly at one time, only one limited time. Another perspective, panav yadav raglav, avalo kol gufo. You're allowed to wash your face, your hands, and your legs, but not your entire body. So, a significant limitation. A third perspective is rochetz kol gufo. You can wash your entire body, umashayer aver echad. As long as you leave over one limb unwashed, then it's okay. Why are any of these opinions in play? What is the concern about using preheated water on Shabbat? Well, of course, the concern is if we allow you to have unfettered access to wash yourself with preheated water, you might come to heat the water on Shabbat itself, in violation of the Torah law. Let's go to another perspective on Mem, and that is the temperature at which water is considered to have boiled for halachic purposes, to have been considered cooked for halachic purposes. One definition is yad soledet bo, the temperature at which your hand would recoil if you touched something that hot. Alternatively, kreso shel tinok nichvet, that if you were to pour that hot liquid on the stomach of a child, the skin of the child would burn. If it's that hot, it has been cooked. Let's go to Mem Aleph 41. Here the question is about pouring cold water into hot water on Shabbat. When you do that, there's a good chance that you are going to heat up and cook the amount of cold water that is poured into the large amount of hot water sitting below. And so the Gemara tells us, Lo yiten muatin sheyechamu, you're not allowed to pour a small amount of cold water so that cold water will become hot. Haval, however, notem rubin, you're allowed to put a lot of cold water, kadesh lav shiran, in order that they shall remain lukewarm. In other words, the combination of a large amount of cold water and a significant amount of warm water will, on the whole, make things warm. It will not cook the cold water. Let's go to Membet. On Membet 42, we have a discussion of these items that might be cooked in a secondary vessel. The basic halacha is that if you put foodstuffs in a first-degree vessel that is boiling hot, kli rishon, those items that you put in will cook, and this is a violation of Shabbat. But in a kli sheni, a secondary vessel, the items will probably not cook. There are certain items that we know for sure will not cook in a secondary vessel, namely tavlin, spices, mayim, water, and shemen, oil. The Gemara questions whether or not salt, melach, also has the status of those items that can cook in a secondary vessel or cannot cook in such a vessel. Let's go to Mem Gimel 43. And here the question is tiltul min hatzad. We're not allowed to move items that are muktzah, that are off limits on Shabbat. However, under extenuating circumstances, are we allowed to move them in an indirect fashion, min hatzad, in a bizarre way? So, for example, moving a corpse, a dead body, out of a precarious situation, out of the sun, or out of the rain. One perspective is, you're allowed to do tiltul min hatzad. Another perspective is that you are not, and therefore you'd have to place a non-muktzah item on the guf shalmet, on the corpse, in order to move it out of its situation. I hope you enjoyed this week's program. Catch us next week.